welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. I've got Adele Bridges here, and I'm having a little bit of a moment. I actually went through your YouTube channel yesterday to prepare for our call today, and I did the little yoga hips and fun video that you have up there. And I've been following your and yeah, I've been following your work for a while, and I love the way that you make yoga approachable, but then also find ways to challenge me. And in particular, you do this weird thing around neural flossing that I'm just starting to ooh, that's kind of fun and nerdy and juicy and exciting in a different way to look at bringing sort of the science of neurology into yoga. And so yeah, I reached out because I just needed to have a conversation with you, so I'm really stoked that you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here too, and totally honored. As I mentioned before we were recording, I am a listener of this podcast, and I absolutely love it. So it's really exciting for me to be here too.
Hey. So we're just gonna get into the juicy pieces because I don't want to waste any time, because we scheduled to record this a while ago, and I've been almost having conversations with you in my own mind about this. So I just want to get into it.
Cool, yeah. So let's get into the juicy stuff.
Yeah. I reached out to you because I was just witnessing an interaction between you and your community around yoga. I'm going to use accessibility as a word here. And so, we sort of unpacked little pieces of it before we hit record here, but I just thought, let's put that on the table as an event that we can sort of unpack, because I think that a lot of folks who are part of this audience, part of this community, are really scared to push up against offending people, of making other people feel bad about what it is that they do, of kind of dimming their shine and making themselves small because they're scared they're going to hurt somebody else's feelings. And so this is all going to make sense once you sort of share your story a bit. So I want to just invite you to share what you feel comfortable sharing first.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, I completely understand. And it's been a journey that I've been kind of trudging through over the last, for the entire time that I've been a yoga teacher, is that finding that balance between teaching what the yoga practice is to me. And I mean, I think that, anybody that teaches any kind of practice, such as yoga or whatever it might be, I mean, any kind of teacher really is only going to be able to really teach what that thing is to them, how they interpret it, right? And it's, it didn't take me long. I think it was right about 2 or 3 days into my yoga teacher training, the first, 200-hour basic sort of level yoga teacher training that I did, when I realized that other people were, I'm going to phrase it this way, allowing themselves to be intimidated by my physical practice. But meanwhile, what they didn't realize is I was intimidated by their sort of spiritual practice, the fact that they knew all of the mudras, or they had chants memorized that I'd never heard before. And so it was very early on in my time as a yoga teacher that I realized how easy it is for us to be intimidated by others, and that it's really a choice, sorry, tough love here, but at the end of the day, nobody can force you to feel intimidated, just as nobody can force you to feel any other way. It's your decision to take that viewpoint of looking at a person that is, able to do something that you can't do, and choosing whether you're going to say, that, like, I feel less than because of you, and so therefore I'm going to lash out and be like, you need to, like, dim your light. You need to stop being so whatever, so that I feel better about myself. Or saying, like, wow, okay, that person can do a bunch of stuff that I can't do and maybe we'll never be able to do, but that doesn't diminish my own strengths and my own abilities and my skills and what I have to share. And so I'm going to be inspired by that person. And so a little phrase that I've kind of been putting out into the world now and then since I very first got started back in 2016 is, you can either choose to be intimidated or inspired, and it's your choice. And so for anybody out there that's listening that feels like they need to dim their light and they need to hold back on their abilities, you can be compassionate and kind and inviting and welcoming to other people without hiding your strengths. And I think that's, maybe sometimes you mess up, I mean, for sure I've taught yoga classes where I was like, okay, all right, yeah, those 70-year-old ladies were not ready for plank position in the first 10 minutes of class. Like, like I've made mistakes as a yoga teacher. As we all do, but it's like anything, you just open yourself up to feedback and, to the fact that maybe you could do things differently, but that doesn't mean that you have to hide who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were sort of unpacking that, I think what came up for me is this very, very old wound of mine, and I'll own that it is my wound, that I have worked really hard to integrate over the years. And I also think of this as being a wound that is represented within our culture because we live within this system of, I feel like just calling it capitalism is like, doesn't encompass it. It's like the whole pattern of extraction, of competition, of needing to look at the world through a hierarchical lens. But I grew up with a brother, and in our family, for whatever reason, I think that part of it was because our parents wanted each of us to feel special. It was always deemed that, like, I was the smart one and he was the artistic one. And, I was the hard worker and he was the athletic one. And so, like, they really pushed us in these avenues and almost, like, didn't want us to have, like, competition with each other. And so it was this, like, weird dynamic within my family structure of and, like, this is a more integrated when, like, I don't have these feelings with my brother anymore, but it was like sometimes I would feel like, oh, he didn't do that well at that swim match. Like, that kind of made my ego feel something akin to satisfaction, and when we grow up and when we don't look at these aspects of the soup that we all grow up in, then we have a tendency to look at other people on the internet. And, I love my brother, and I would not even in that moment, I would never say, like, oh, you did badly on that match, so, like, nah. But, like, there's something about being on the internet and being, like, a fairly anonymous person on the internet where it feels easy to take that shadow and to take that wound and then, like, push it onto other people. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. It's, I think it is one of the insidious things about social media. There's lots of beautiful, wonderful things about social media, but, and the internet as a whole, but it plays on our psychology in so many different ways. And one of those ways is that we're not getting the same kind of and I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm pretty sure there's like specific neurons in our brain that are excited whenever we see another human face, right? And it makes us more compassionate. There's a biological reason. There's literally things happening in the brain that make it easier for us to be less compassionate and empathetic and just more, less feeling towards others when all we're seeing are perhaps the words that they've typed out, right? Instead of a face. And it's actually, and I realize I'm only kind of answering one tiny aspect of the thing that you just shared, but one of the things that I have started to do is if I get annoyed with somebody, so, sometimes people will come in my DMs and they're asking for all sorts of things as if, like, for free. And I'm like, first of all, I'm busy. But secondly, like, if I were to do that for you, you wouldn't get it for free. Like, I'm sorry, but like, stop trying to
reciprocity matters.
Yeah. And I want to be like, rah, back at them, but I just go and click on their profile. And as long as they're not a private account, just seeing their face, it reminds me, like, okay, this is a human being, and then I can respond with kindness. But then also on the flip side of that, if I get a nasty comment, I'll actually just respond to that person in their DMs, just saying, like, hey, thanks for leaving the comment. And I kind of respond with a question, like, what can you, like, tell me a little bit more about what led you to say that to me, or something like that. Just kind of bringing everything back to a human level. And I think that it's just, to me, it's been something that's very, very important to always, always, always just remember that on the other side of all of these Instagram handles or whatever it is another human being, apart from the bots, obviously. But and I think it's the same kind of, like with your brother. Like if you're looking at, if you're feeling a sense of, like, sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like a spiteful kind of success and feeling of reward from his failure. Like, that's very much just looking at the situation from your point of view. As soon as you can kind of, like, invite in what he might be feeling, it completely changes, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the practice that we all need to, that I think everybody can probably benefit from doing more of. And it's a practice, you don't do it once and then you're done for the rest of your life. It's like brushing your teeth. You got to keep doing it. But just putting yourself in that position where you're looking at this person as another human being, which they are, and seeing that, they've got emotions around this situation just as much as you do.
Absolutely. Which kind of brings me to this troubling thing I've been seeing. I think it's so obvious to see it in social media, but I think it's sort of the broader spectrum of our culture right now, which is, I reached out to you because I saw some people commenting about how your practice isn't yoga because you are so much more advanced, in quotation marks, than maybe their practice is. And to me, I saw those comments and I was like, how, not just how rude, but also like I was sharing with you before we hit record, like, that's like telling a monkey to stop climbing because it makes this penguin feel bad about itself, And so I'm not quite sure where I want to take this conversation, because it's still something that I actually still feel pretty sticky about myself, of like, why is this happening right now? And this, like, victim mentality of, like, let's reward and cater to the maybe folks who aren't quite as skilled. But then at the same time, like, I'm like, but there's like an entire ecosystem here of like yoga teachers, you know? Like if Adele
Yeah.
doesn't work for you, then, you know, I follow a woman, her handle is Yoga for All Bodies, and she's got lots of really like slow and, you know, movements with props and like ways to do things in such a way that maybe more people might feel access to.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be other people who are more drawn to your work. And you know, I'm somewhere like in the middle where I'm like, okay, so I'm never going to be able to do some of the things that Adele works. I have some injuries that prevent me from doing that. And you know, I also don't have, you know, as much of an inclination to devote as much time as you do to your practice. But that doesn't mean I don't get something from your practice and watching your practice as well and feeling inspired by your practice, you know, as just as the same as I would be inspired by this other woman as well, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around this
I
interesting trend in the world.
I have so many thoughts. And I mean, you know, everything comes back to our little lizard brains, our scared little subconscious brains that just want to keep us safe. And that victim mindset is part of that. By playing the victim, we don't have to step up and take and, you know, go through the effort and do the work to, because it is work. It is work. I mean, just this morning, oh my gosh. So just as a little, an example, before recording this podcast, there were 5 videos that I wanted to film. That was my plan. I was like, I'm going to film these 5 videos, yoga classes, to upload to my app, and I like to feel good going into that. And last night I was like super excited about it. I was like, yeah, I'm all ready to go, and it's nice for me to feel like I'm going into making these videos like in a good mood, so I can exude that positive energy. But then there was just a series of little events that happened this morning as I was getting ready that I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated, and I so badly wanted to blame somebody, and I just wanted to be angry with somebody, and it felt so good to be like, rah, and I probably would have carried on with that. But I was like, I've got to switch my mood around, because I can't like go and make like a gentle flow for my subscribers if I'm like, the world sucks, nothing's working, everything's going wrong, right? So I was like, I have to change my mood, but there was such like a strong part of me that did not want to, and I was just like, this is really, can I swear? This is really fucking hard. Like this takes so much more strength than like holding a plank or doing, you know, push-ups or you know, anything that's like takes physical exertion. It is so much harder when you're feeling like frustrated and you just want to blame somebody and you're in that victim mentality to just go, you know what? It's okay. I got this. Things went wrong. Some things that, you know, weren't my fault. I'm having to deal with them. Other people didn't do their job, so I'm having to clean up their shit. But you know what? I'm going to put all that behind me, and I'm going to focus on what is working. Like, that is so hard to do.
It is.
And it takes an inner strength that I think you don't know how much inner strength that takes until you go through it. And it's like anything else. It's like any other muscle. The more you strengthen it, the easier it gets. But that's the way I see it. I think that you know, we humans have created this world where everything is easy, and as you know, technology, it's exponential. Like the graph or whatever, that line graph of technological advances, you know, it just keeps going higher and higher, going more and more vertical, because the more technology we have, the more technology we can create, right? And so we can't keep up. Our biology can't keep up with it. And so we're in this world where I could literally stay on my butt not get up from my chair and have everything that I need brought to me because I do this on my phone, right? And it's great. It's great. I'm all about like ordering some food every once in a while and have it brought to my door. But the point is, as we all know, the world that we've created means that we are it's part of our biology to avoid effort and to avoid discomfort, because that's kind of what kept us alive for so many millennia, right? But we are therefore harming ourselves by not practicing things that are difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one of the most wonderful and amazing things about yoga is that I think any yoga class will challenge anybody that goes into it in some way. All right, sure, maybe you're not going to be physically challenged if you're an ex-dancer or you're an ex-gymnast and you go to like a restorative yoga class. Of course, physically you're not going to be challenged, but mentally you are. Emotionally you probably are. Mm-hmm. There's going to be things like that you find challenging, and the practice of yoga is not what you do with your body. It is the practice of understanding what is going on with you internally as you do these things with your body, or the things that you don't do with your body, when you're having to sit still and simply breathe. And so, yes, for that reason, I love seeing all of the other yoga teachers out there and the Instagram accounts out there that do make yoga accessible. There's a guy that his thing is, what's it called, like remixing other people's reels, and he did one of mine, and he'll remix these yogis like me that have a really strong practice into a chair yoga flow. And I think that's so wonderful. Like when he did mine, I was so happy to share it. And yeah, but it's like you said, we have to respect that there's like a whole ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And people with a background in gymnastics and dance, or people who are just naturally very athletic and they like to do the handstands, and that's where they get that challenge, they need yoga too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. and yeah, like for sure, I'm gonna get a lot of like internal growth out of going to like a restorative yoga class that doesn't challenge me physically. But also, there's so much I think that we can get mentally and emotionally from a physical practice that strengthens us as well. And yeah, so the way I see it is I am that teacher that's there for the people who they're ready to, like whatever, like what I filmed this morning. Oh my gosh. There's no names for it. Like it's just weird stuff that doesn't even have a name, but it's really hard. It's going to make you feel your muscles. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think I said everything I wanted to say.
So I've been furiously writing notes because there's several things that I want to go back and like hit on.
Good.
So the first one is you sharing about what happened this morning, of like you were going to record 5 videos and you just like were really frustrated with life. Like the piece there that I think is important to highlight is that you acknowledged that anger.
Yes.
Right? Like that is such an important piece that people don't allow themselves to do, and then it mutates within them, and then they either feel like I'm shitty, like I am not good enough, or let's point that mutated anger into that other person outside of me. Mm-hmm. And so that piece around acknowledging how frustrated you are, like that's the yoga practice right there.
100%.
Right? It's that like it's not just you saying, I'm just going to put this behind me and I'm going to just like walk away from it. It's like, I'm really fucking mad. And it's like a both and situation, right? Like I'm really mad and I have an obligation to make sure that my subscribers get what they need. And so I am going to set this aside, or I'm going to do something to take care of it, or I'm going to integrate it in some way so that I can show up in a more regulated way for my people, right? So I think that that's like an important piece to highlight there, that like the victim archetype struggles with. It's like if you
Yes.
can't even acknowledge your anger, then you internalize it as something that you should be ashamed of, or you project it out onto other people, because that anger is an energy that needs to be digested in some way. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's the first piece that I want to take a pause and just see what you want to say about that piece.
Yeah, thank you. I love further dissecting all of these little things, and I think it's important. Yeah, for me, that's one of the major elements of my personal journey that the yoga practice has given me. You were absolutely right in saying that. That's kind of the yoga is as being able to first just acknowledge it, become aware, and to me that's why I feel confident in calling myself a yoga teacher, because I've gone through periods of my life when I'm like, maybe I should just drop the yoga and I should just say I do like movement or something, because am I not yoga enough? Do I not like do enough of the other sort of more traditional things? But then I'm like, no, I am a yoga teacher, because it doesn't matter how strong my classes might be. I make a point to always remind my students to just notice what their thoughts and their emotions are in reaction to the physical challenge that they're experiencing. Because that, like I said right back at the beginning, you can only share what the practice is to you, and that is what
That's the
yoga gave
practice.
me.
Yeah.
Was you start out going like, okay, when I put my body in this shape, my hamstrings feel this way. But then it kind of goes a little bit deeper, and you go, whenever I'm holding this pose, I kind of want to punch the yoga teacher for making me hold this. And
Yeah.
you detach your identity to the emotion or the thought that you're having. I think that that's the problem, isn't it? Because it's so easy it's like you said, you wrap who you are up in that feeling. You identify as that feeling instead of recognizing I am me experiencing this emotion. I am me as a separate entity to this thought that I am having. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's finally where I've gotten to, where I can just go, all right, I feel really frustrated.
Yeah.
Let me just recognize that all of these frustrations are not even going to matter in like a day, or certainly not by next week.
Yeah.
And there's all of these other things around me that I can be grateful for, and slowly shift my mood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the second thing that I wanted to like pick apart and digest even further here is this concept of effort. So, I started out by saying I'm kind of in between like where Adele would be and this other woman who I don't know her name. I'm kicking myself for not knowing her name. But she does like a lot of like more like restorative, slow chair yoga. And part of that story for me is like I recognize how much effort that it takes for you to hold a practice the way that you hold your yoga practice. And it's not that I can't do that. Like if I wanted to, I could devote that time and develop my practice in the same way. But my priorities are different, right? And so yoga is a really beautiful aspect of my life. And, I probably attend to my yoga practice a total of 3 hours a week, which is what the balance point is for me. And that is like the perfect balance point for me. And I think that people, I want to say this carefully, because I think that it can get misconstrued a bit. But people look at this concept of effort, and instead of being like, I want to celebrate that about Adele, they will make it about, well, I can't possibly do that. Like, look at all of the privilege that she has in her body, in her time, in her capacity. And that's not fair. And so I could either turn that into self shame or, again, turn that into a projection, right? Instead of just being like, I'm going to acknowledge, hey, for me, yoga is not the like top 10 things in my life, you know, the way that it fits in for Adele. Same thing like with me and my brother and his swimming practice, right? Like he devoted so much more time to swimming than I did. So of course he did better. Like
Yeah.
that's that's a rational sort of like A to Z sort of progression, right? And again, it's that idea of like we all want that quick dopamine hit of like I put in a little bit of effort and then got maximum result. And yoga is like not one of those things that you can fake,
No.
you know? And so it's like it's this weird thing where it's like, well, I don't want to put in that much effort, so why should she shine? Instead of being like, I acknowledge that that's not the amount of effort that I want to put in. This is the balance point for me. That's the balance point for her. And how wonderful is it that yoga gets to play this role in both of our lives, and it means something different to each of us, right?
Yeah. I think that's absolutely, yeah, it's so important because it's like with anything in life, happiness. Happiness, I think, is a good example that you alone choose what makes you happy, right? And it's something that I realized a few years ago, that one of the reasons I was going through a really tough time, a little mental health wobble, I like to call it. Yeah, just feeling that in every way not enough, and like I just needed to kind of see what I could do about erasing myself from the planet, you know, like just a very dark place. And I realized it's because I was viewing my life and my accomplishments and my abilities and everything that I had through the lens of somebody else, of other people, and what they would think, like if that would make me happy or not. And I thought, it doesn't matter. It's my life. Am I happy with what I've got? And am I happy with, you know, all of the things in my life? Am I happy with who I am and how much, you know, what I do and what I put out in the world? And if the answer is yes, then you're happy. And it doesn't matter if other people would be like, ew, if I lived your life, I would not be happy. Well, that's fine. It's not their life. And success is another one, you know, success, like who cares what another person's definition of success is? What's your definition of success for you right now?
Exactly.
And so I think that it's the same for, yeah, your physical abilities, and you know how deep you can go into a forward fold and all of this kind of stuff. And it's one of the reasons that I'm actually so I really try and push back against traditional alignment and the dogma that a posture has to be look exactly like this, because I think that people end up trying, they push themselves and they get wrapped up mentally in what a shape needs to look like and how to get their body into that shape. And I'm like, no. Where you are right now, like let's take Hanumanasana or splits, right? Like where you are right now with your hips, like say 2 feet off the floor, why don't we say that that is your version of Hanumanasana? Like, there you go. You can do it. You've got Hanumanasana in your practice.
Yeah.
Like, just kind of redefining what all of these different things mean to you. Just like you can say, actually, maybe you are happy. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that decision, like you said, of how much you choose to prioritize these things, you know, like I would love to be able to play the ukulele like Israel, what's his name, the Hawaiian dude, you know, somewhere over the rainbow. Who knows how to pronounce his last name? I don't know. But, you know, and I probably could. It's like you were saying, like I could get a ukulele teacher and I could put in the hours and the effort to learn to play the ukulele like nobody's business. But it's just not on the top of my priority list, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's like the piece is like if there's anything that I've taken, and I've been really lucky in the yoga teachers that I've chosen to learned from, if there's anything that I've taken from yoga practice is like, wherever you are right now, this is okay, you know? And it's this concept of like, I think of this in terms of nervous system work as well as is acknowledging where you are, making that okay, and like, can you stretch just a little bit? Like, even if it's just like it might not look any different in your body, just like it might not look any different from the outside, whatever it is, that thing it is that you're efforting in, you know, but it feels different on the inside for you. Like, that is what the yoga practice is for me, you know?
Yes.
And so I may never reach the classic form of Hanumanasana, but I do know what it feels like to stretch those body parts, and it feels like I get to interact with whatever bubbles up to the surface in those moments. And like, that's kind of what I've learned from watching you is like, that's the piece to work with, you know? Like, that is the information that your body is giving you, and that's what you want to work with. And so don't make it about somebody else's practice and making somebody else's practice wrong.
Yeah. Or even where you were like 2 weeks ago. Like what I filmed this morning, the theme of all of those classes was like respecting the natural rhythms within us. And, you know, the fact that maybe where you are in your cycle, or just, you know, maybe you just didn't get a great night's sleep last night or whatever, maybe the effort that you put in isn't physical in terms of like trying to go deeper. Maybe the effort is learning the skill of holding back and recognizing that today I'm not going to push physically, and that for a lot of people will take a mental effort. And so there's always effort somewhere. It doesn't always have to be physical. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit, just because I think this is something that a lot of, well, my audience is spiritual entrepreneurs. One of the things that people are really scared of is feedback from people, from the masses. What is the discernment that you find in yourself in terms of not being swayed from your own center when it comes to some of the things that you're talking about, and, you know, showing up authentically as yourself and not dimming your light?
Well, I think it's the discernment comes from recognizing, you know, is somebody, first of all, is somebody just being unkind? I mean, sometimes, you know, feedback can come through that it's not feedback, it's criticism, and you know, you just have to ask yourself, well, if somebody that I love received this, would I be like, hey, no, you don't deserve that? Or, and, you know, recognizing that you never deserve any kind of like vitriol, right? But then with feedback, constructive criticism, it's also, I think, important to recognize, like, is this somebody trying to, like, telling me that I need to be a different person, a different version of my, you know, a different, like, change who I am, or just change how I do something? You know, is somebody saying, like, I didn't quite understand this concept that you were explaining in your workshop, and maybe you could have done a few more drills to allow us to kind of cement that in? Or are they saying, like, you know, like, you need to change your personality or something, you know? So that's been a big thing for me, is like, because I have learned to ask for feedback after running events or workshops or whatever, and it's so hard because it's so hard not to take anything personally, but just recognizing that if somebody is like having a dig at you and who you are and what you do, then you got to ignore it, because that's coming from some sort of wound from them wanting you to be different for their own needs. But if they're asking you to just do something differently, to present differently, to add something in or whatever, then that has nothing to do with you. That's just how you present your material, so to speak, like, for example. So a really powerful tool for me through everything that I've, like my whole journey, I guess, as a yoga teacher, has been to regularly just go back to my why, Why am I sharing this? Like, why did I decide to start teaching this? And there have been a couple of times in my career that I've gotten into such a depth of self-doubt that I genuinely was like ready to announce it to everybody, like, I'm sorry, these things that you've booked onto, I'm going to refund you, it's all canceled. I'm like ready to just pull the plug on it. And I've realized that I've gotten myself in that place because I've been trying to emulate other people. I've been trying to be a yoga teacher like that other yoga teacher, or I'm trying to, do my, launch my course the way that other person launched their course. And just coming back to, well, what's my intention? What's my why? And what's my definition of happiness and success and all of that for me has always kind of put me back on track.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like one of the things that I say is that business is a spiritual practice. And this is exactly why, is because your business, there's so many ways in which you could have fallen back into those conditions, right? And your business was the one that was like, no, like, this is how we do things. This is our why. This is our definition of happiness and success. And so we have to lean into that no matter how difficult that is. I think one of the pieces around feedback that I want to circle back to is, to me, everything goes back to the nervous system. And I think about putting myself into the shoes of the person who's giving feedback. And so I actually think of that as like a sacred exchange. If I am giving somebody feedback, like, I check in with myself about a couple of things. The first piece is, am I in regulation around this? Or in as close to regulation as I can be. Sometimes it's not always possible to be perfectly regulated about things, right? The second piece is, did they ask for this feedback? The third piece is, are they somebody who is going to be open to the feedback? I'm sure that everyone, like, you can like sort of think through the Rolodex of people in your life, and you can imagine, a close friend of yours who would be really open to feedback, and maybe there's a difficult family member who would definitely not be open to receiving feedback from you. And then the fourth piece is, do I want to have continued relationship with this person? And so those are the parameters in which I will give and share feedback to other people. And so I think it's fair to expect that in return if somebody is going to be giving feedback to me. Are they in regulation? Are they mindful of consent? Are they, are they open? And is this going to actually help us have a continued relationship? And so, I get criticism online as well, because I talk about wanting to untangle ourselves from the toxicity of capitalism. I don't think of capitalism as being all bad, but I do think that there are some really, really hard things to navigate around capitalism. And the thing that I most commonly get is like, how can you talk about being anti-capitalist and still receive money for your work? And to me, it's like, oh, like, you didn't hit on any of those parameters. And so therefore, your quote unquote feedback to me is not a valuable piece of information because you haven't done your own work on your side of it to give me valuable feedback, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that. I'm like taking mental notes because as you're saying all of that, it's kind of bringing me back to times when, yeah, like I remember I taught a workshop, I don't know, a couple years now, and one of the participants just sent me this big, long message on Instagram giving me feedback that I didn't ask for, and I just didn't even bother to read it because I thought I didn't ask for that, so I'm not in a place to receive that because but it's like I didn't think about it at that time, but now that you've put it into those words and defining those parameters, it does make a lot of sense that it's almost like, does it come from that person's ego, their need to feel seen and heard, and I think it's so important as well. Like that's such a good point. I'm learning so much from you, Kat. This is why I love your podcast. But yeah, to put yourself in the mindset of the person that's giving the feedback, like why, yeah, what kind of state were they in giving that feedback, and that, yeah, that's so helpful.
Yeah, because I mean, I've also received really valuable feedback, you know.
Oh yeah.
And have changed certain things about how I run workshops and how I even communicate to people based on feedback that people have given me. But I think the most important piece, at least for me, just because this is sort of the like framework that I look at everyone and everything in my life, is the regulation piece. Is like, if I can sense that somebody actually sat with this and like tried to like sort of navigate it on their own and figure out their own way through this, and then like as a way to like bridge that process they needed to bring me into that process, like I think that's a fair place even if I didn't ask for that feedback, you know. So like I'm thinking of an example where like way back in the day, actually I shouldn't say like way back in the day, it was probably like 20, I want to say like 18-ish. I used to call my community my tribe, and talk about it with those words. And I had a close friend of mine send me an email and say like, hey, like I don't think you realize how that word is specifically landing to people. And you know, these are the ways in which I've been advised, because he went and talked to his friends who were Native, and he was like, these are the ways in which I've been advised to like have this conversation with you, and I'm just trying to open up the conversation with you. And I sat with it, and at the time I got a little bit defensive. I had a little bit of like well, if you think about tribe as like the, you know, definition of the word, it's just a group of people. So like, you know, my ego definitely got a little bit caught up in it. But then when I sat with it, I was like, you know, he did his work, you know, he thought about it enough and was thoughtful enough about it that he wanted to bring this to me as a way to like actually bring more safety into my work. And so how can I begrudge him of like bringing that feedback to my plate, even though I didn't ask for that explicitly, you know? And so I think that to me, like the regulation piece is like such a huge part of it.
Yeah, all good points. And I think it's whenever we're coming to another person as an equal, you know, and just saying like, look, I'm not saying this because I'm like, I think I'm better than you or whatever. Like I've made this mistake too. It's just, I care about you. This comes from a place of caring. And communication is such a skill as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I just think about like, there's so many instances I can think back on where I'm sure that the intention was all good, but the way it was communicated just was a shit show.
Yeah.
And that's part of the work that we do, isn't it? Is just learning to choose the right words and put them in an order that lands softly.
Yeah. And I think that is an important part of it too, is like the compassion piece, you know. Particularly, like, just to sort of like circle it back to the online space, is like, I love what you shared. I'm gonna start doing this too. Is going and like looking at the person's face if they have it available to view. When I get, you know, sort of those snarky comments, and asking with compassion and curiosity of like, what did you actually mean by that? And giving them an opportunity to maybe rethink some of their words, which doesn't mean that like I'm being loosey goosey with my boundaries all of a sudden. It's like, okay, like you get an opportunity, and if you can't, you know, step into that opportunity with a sense of like we're equals, then maybe this isn't a conversation that we can continue having.
Yeah. I think asking questions is so powerful and underused. Just have a conversation in the form of questions. Because, yeah, it just kind of, it brings everybody back to that place of like just one human speaking to another, I think.
Well, I am just curious, is there anything else you feel like is just dying to come out, and like you need to say it before we wrap things up here?
No, I guess I just want to shed a little light once again on something that you've mentioned a couple of times. And I just think it's worth saying it again, that everything comes back to the nervous system. And it really changed my life whenever I started to look at everything as like everything that a person does, especially any kind of anything that they do that, you know, is outside of that like mindful behavior. But that it's going to come from a habit that was formed through this need to be safe, or it's coming out of a non-habit, but either way, it's this need to be safe, to feel safe. And the brain is, you know, unfortunately not evolved to always do what's necessarily best for the long term. It's about safety right here, right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's always worth remembering that, just having that reminder for everybody in every aspect of life. If you can, you know, look at yourself, but also other people, and just remember that all the things going on, it's all because we're all just trying to stay safe. Even, you know, you look at, like you were talking about capitalism and stuff, and we've got all these billionaires, these people that are just making like ridiculous amounts of money, but even their drive that has, you know, led them down the path to make all those billions of dollars comes from a place where their nervous system is trying to keep them safe. Yeah. In some way or another. Like, that's what it comes down to. And I think that it can help us really understand ourselves better, but it can also help us have more understanding as well as compassion for other people whenever we're just like, okay, their brain is just trying to keep them safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this circles back to like what you were saying earlier, is I feel like understanding the nervous system has been my spiritual practice in a very similar way that like yoga has been your spiritual practice, because what it's done is it's essentially like basically two roads up the same mountain, right? Of like being able to separate the emotion and the like personalization of that story in with that feeling, right? And just having that space, like that little like breath of breathing room in between the emotion and the like story and the experience is really all we're talking about here, whether you are doing it as a yoga practitioner or you're doing it as a nervous system nerd or something in between, you know, like it's all the same work. So,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your wisdom with us. And I would love to send folks your way. So please let us know, where can we find you in the world?
Thank you. Well, maybe a good place to start is just Instagram, because from there you can kind of check out. I've got a separate Instagram page just for my app, which is Move with Adele. And then you can see from there like the retreat that I'm teaching, that I'm hosting in a couple of months, and the courses that I've got, as well as like all the free resources that you can get, my YouTube channel, my website, my blog, although I haven't written a blog in a long time, so all my blogs will be pretty old, but probably my Instagram page is the best place to start, and you can kind of like click around and see what you like there.
Perfect. And like your YouTube channel has just so much out there. So I think that that's also a good place to dive in if you're looking for like an actual physical yoga flow to just see what Adele's all about.
Yeah, give that a try if you like it. You get 7 days to try out my subscription, Move with Adele, for free before you're committed to that. But even that, I have to say, I think it's a pretty reasonable deal. Mm-hmm. You'll pay less than you'll pay like for a single yoga class in person. So
yeah,
just putting that out there.
Sweet. Alrighty, well, thank you so much.